couldn't help myself but talking about records, because animal husbandry is just part of farm management. It's an important part of farm management. And there's a quote here about, profit is not a bad thing. It allows you to reinvest in your farming operation. So I can't help but to say, let's, as we go through the stages of life, think about what expenses and what income is possible, what expenses are necessary and what income is possible to be able to pay for the land, to be able to pay for the labor and management time. And I think this is an area where is one of the most common places that beginning farmers don't provide for full cost accounting. If you want to have a hobby, that's one thing, but if you want to have a business, then you have to pay yourself for your time. So and then you'll be able to analyze, is the benefit greater than the cost? And then what are those milestones where you have enough capital, you pay yourself, you begin to generate income, recuperate the investment, and begin to turn a profit. So it's a process, an iterative process of whole farm planning, using enterprise budgets, raising birds and keeping in production records, then analyzing your data to evaluate how you're doing. And that was the old story about how do you make good decisions? Experience. How do you gain experience? Sometimes it's through bad decisions. But the best thing to do is to turn that into learning. And you don't have to you don't have to invent all this yourself. There are some available enterprise budgets. NCAT has some. Many other organizations may have some enterprise budgets, so you can look at what the potential costs and income sources are. And this is it's just a very simple way of tracking total costs and income. You can play around with these enterprise budgets and also profitability calculators. These used to be available on the website along with a webinar by Adam Haiti out of Wisconsin. And as I was updating my resources to the information and notes on this, I find that website is no longer has these. But if you want them, I have the Excel files on my computer, and I'd be happy to share them with you. And what's useful about them, I know they're really hard to see, but you can see that there are different places where there's yellow spaces. You can input different scenarios, number of birds, cost of feed using real feed costs, cost of housing, and just play with these until you figure out what looks like a viable business model on using these spreadsheets. And you can think about the viability of, if I need to, at what price will I begin to make a profit during year 1 or during year 2? And they're very informative. So here's just a kind of a summary of all that goes into the farm in terms of the inputs and costs. That's not a complete list, but just a sampling. And the management practices that we need to keep track of. And of course, the audit trail of what is produced. I have this figure, thanks to Dan Macon, the economist at Foothill UC Cooperative Extension, where the red line represents a certain number of overhead costs that you'll have no matter how much you produce. Blue representing production, but and then of course it's a representative diagram because the income doesn't begin at the beginning. If you think about a flock of laying hens, you build the house, you buy the chicks, you feed them for 5 months before you get even the first egg. So thinking about graphing this out. So Dan says, know your numbers. We have a responsibility to the rest of the agricultural community to treat our own businesses seriously. So ratios are very useful. Calculating ratios, and we can talk about how this is done. Sometimes, and I had a time in my life where I had this problem, is don't bother me with the facts, I just want to farm. But if you want to farm in a sustainable way and for the long haul, bother me with the facts. I want to know what is realistic and what is possible. So some of the key ratios are lay rate. So that would be the number of eggs laid divided by the number of birds in your flock. So if you have 100 birds and you get 80 eggs in a day, then you have a lay rate of 80%, which should be pretty good. You can learn something about estimates of productivity of birds from the hatchery, but you won't know what's happening on your own farm until you keep track of it. How many eggs did I get? How many birds do I have? How many eggs per bird per year? And feed conversion is one of those other really important things. How much feed am I feeding? And how much meat or how many eggs do I get from that? And that will influence how I need to set my pricing in order to have a profitable operation. So gather the data, gain experience. This is, again, attributed to Fifth Crow. The records, you need some kind of container to keep key information. You can do it in a very simple way using paper and pencil, and it helps to have a format where you capture the information every day that you need. And all records, all farm records, I would say, are best when they're kept by the person who's closest to the time and the place where the activity takes place. So this can be hung in the chicken house or the packing house, wherever you watch the eggs, and keep track of things. And once in a while, of course, you need to add to this the number of birds you have. Of course, there are more sophisticated ways to do it. Both of these, I'd say the best record keeping system is the one that you'll use. So if you know that you'll use a paper and pencil, go for it. And if you like to be a little more techie and have things summed up and you don't want to do the calculations manually, Google Forms could be a useful way to do it. We're not promoting Google here. We don't endorse any product, but Todd Kelman is really good with teaching about how to set up a Google form. And these are places on the website that show, you can have the link here to each of these, how to use them, how to set it up, and a description of how it can be useful and how they have used Google Forms to track data on the UC Davis pastured poultry farm.